Section 7 of the Book of the Ancient Greeks. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Book of the Ancient Greeks by Dorothy Mills. Part 2, Chapter 4. The Greek City-State. Whenever men live together in communities, no matter how small they may be, some form of law has to be observed in order to maintain order, and that there may be justice between man and his neighbors. The form that this law takes in different places and in different communities is what is called government. The earliest form of government in Greece was, like all primitive government, that of the family, and the word of the head of the family was law to all those belonging to it. The land on which they lived belonged to the family as a whole, not to separate individuals, and the dead were always buried there, until in time the family claimed as their own that land where they had lived for generations, and where their ancestors were buried. After a time it became more convenient for families to join together and live in one community. By this means, the labor of cultivating the land could be more evenly distributed, and in times of attack from enemies, larger and stronger forces could be used for defense. This grouping of families together made a village, and the strongest and most capable man in the village would become its chief. In time, just as families had found it more to their advantage to group themselves together and form villages, so did the villages living in the same neighborhood find it a better thing to join together and form a still larger community, which became known as a kingdom, because instead of having a chief, they were ruled by a king. At first the kings, like the chiefs, were chosen because of their ability and power. Later the office became hereditary and was handed down from father to son. Now because the Greek communities lived in the plains, separated from each other by mountains, instead of forming one large kingdom, they formed a great many small ones. There was in ancient times no king of Greece, but Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, and countless other cities had their own independent forms of government, their own rulers, their own armies, their own ships, and except that they were all Greek and were all bound together by ties of language and religion, they were quite independent of each other. All these independent cities became known in time as city-states, for to the Greek the state meant the city, the territory immediately surrounding it was included in the state, but the city was the most important part of it. All communities are always governed in one of three ways, either by one man, or by a few men, or by many men, and the Greeks tried all these ways until they found the one that answered best to their ideals of what a city-state should be. All states did not develop in the same way, but one stands out from the others as having most nearly reached the Greek ideal. That state was Athens. Her story shall be told in its own place. In this chapter we will see what the Greeks thought an ideal state should be, and what they believed to be the duties of a good citizen. The Greek philosopher Aristotle wrote a book in which these ideals were set forth. He believed that the end for which the state existed was that all its citizens could lead what he called a, quote, good life, end quote, and by that he meant the life which best gives opportunities for man to develop his highest instincts, and which makes it possible for every citizen to develop his own gifts, whatever they may be, in the highest and truest way. To realize such a life there must be law and order in a state, and Aristotle considered that the first thing necessary to ensure this was that the state must not be too large. He believed that the greatness of a state was not determined by the size of its territory or the number of its population, but that though a certain size and certain numbers helped to make a state dignified and noble, unless these were combined with good law and order, the state was not great. States, he said, were like animals and plants or things made by human art which, if they are too large, lose their true nature and are spoiled for use. But how is one to know when the limit in size and population has been reached? Is there any test by which it can be discovered whether a state has grown, or is in danger of growing, too large? Aristotle answered this question by saying that the state must be large enough to include opportunities for all the variety and richness of what he called the, quote, good life, end quote, but not so large that the citizens could not see it or think of it in their minds as one whole of which they knew all the parts. He also thought it necessary that the character of all citizens should be well known, an impossibility in too large a community. But how else, he asked, could men elect their magistrates wisely? The duty of the state was, then, to ensure the possibility of a, quote, good life, end quote, to all its citizens. What was the Greek ideal of citizenship? First of all, every citizen was expected to take a direct and personal share in all the affairs of the state. To the Greek there was no separation between private and public life. All things concerning the state were his affairs, and it was expected that everyone should have an opinion of his own, that he should think clearly on all matters of common interest, and not allow himself to be swayed by his feelings without honestly thinking the matter out. And to a Greek, thinking meant straight thinking, the power to know right from wrong, to judge justly without prejudices or passion, to separate the important from the unimportant, and to follow undismayed wherever the truth might lead. This belief in the duty of the citizen to be personally active in the affairs of the state tended to keep the state small. For if every citizen was to attend the meetings of the assembly, the latter must be of such a size that everyone could be heard if he desired to speak, and it was necessary that a very short journey should bring the country dweller into the city to attend to the state business. For frequent journeys and long absences from his farm or his flocks would be impossible for the countryman. Further, the Greek believed that wealth was allowed to a man only as a trust. Certain privileges and rights came to him because of its possession, but they were privileges and rights that required of their owner distinct duties. The more a man had, the more did the state require of him. He had to give his time to the making of laws, his wealth built ships, bore the expense of public festivals, adorned the city with beautiful buildings. It was spent not on himself alone, but shared with his fellow citizens, and given to that which was their common interest. This resulted in a passionate devotion of every Greek to his city, for every individual had a definite share in some way or other in the making of it, and by the sacrifice of his life in times of danger, he proved again and again that he was in very truth ready to die for it. The ideal city demanded very high standards of her citizens, and no Greek state attained these perfectly. But in their search for what they conceived to be the highest perfection, the Greeks found out truths both concerning government and the real meaning of citizenship that have remained one of the priceless possessions of mankind. End of section 7.